So, I want you to imagine for a second that the everyday world around you, the street you walk down, the room you're sitting in right now.
Right, the solid stuff we just take for granted.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine that it's all just a paper-thin veil. And right underneath that veil, stretched incredibly tight, is something ancient, something totally alien, and just completely overwhelming.
It's a really unsettling concept to sit with, honestly. I mean, we navigate our daily lives relying heavily on the absolute solidity of our reality.
Oh, 100%. We need to think the pavement under our feet is just concrete.
Right. The laws of physics are immutable. We just naturally assume that the mundane world we see and interact with is all there is.
We do, because it's comforting. But what if that comfort is basically a trick of the light? What if the real world is that overwhelming, terrifying force hiding just underneath?
That tension right there is exactly what we're looking at today.
Yes, that is our mission for today's deep dive. We are exploring the life, the mind, and the massive genre-defining influence of the Welsh author Arthur Machen.
A truly fascinating figure.
Absolutely. And we have an incredible stack of sources today. We're looking at literary critiques of weird fiction, Macon's own intensely personal journals, and even historical records detailing mass hysteria during World War I.
Yeah, the mass hysteria part is, well, it's wild.
It really is. Our goal is to trace the biography of a man who lived from 1863 to 1947, spent much of his life toiling in total obscurity, and yet, somehow managed to lay the foundational bedrock for modern horror.
Well, to really understand how Machen revolutionized the genre, you have to look at the extreme contradictions in his biography.
The paradox of his life, right?
Exactly. His life was essentially split between two entirely different dimensions. On one hand, you have his incredibly rich inner life.
Right, because he was born in Wales, so he grew up totally steep in local ancient folklore.
Yeah, local folklore and deep Catholic mysticism.
Uh-huh.
And he wasn't just casually interested in the occult either. He was an active member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which was, a highly influential, very secretive magical society at the time.
Wait, I actually want to unpack that Golden Dawn connection for a second because it feels really crucial to how he wrote.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Right, because if he's participating in these elaborate occult rituals, it's not just about, wearing robes and chanting.
No, not at all.
It must have given him a structural framework for his worldview. The rituals would teach him that reality is layered, and accessing deeper layers requires deliberately breaking through the mundane.
That is a brilliant way to frame it, actually. The Golden Dawn taught that the material world is merely a symbol of a higher hidden reality.
So his stories operate almost like fictional instruction manuals for peeling back those layers.
Yes, Machen internalized that mechanic entirely. But, and this is the big contradiction, his physical, everyday reality couldn't have been more brutally disconnected from those elevated mystical ideas.
Because he was completely broke.
Right. He spent a vast majority of his adult life based in London, actively battling severe, grinding poverty.
I read he was working as a clerk, right? And a journalist.
A clerk, a journalist, a cataloger, just really hating the drudgery of it all. So he's carrying around these grand cosmic ideas of ancient gods and hidden magic while simultaneously just trying to survive.
Survive the grimy, hyper-industrialized, unforgiving streets of late Victorian London.
Exactly. It was a harsh existence.
But that collision between the magical and the miserable, that is where the sparks fly. How does a poor Welsh mystic, scraping by in London, channel that intense worldview into a new kind of literature?
Well, in 1894, he provides the answer by writing The Great God Pan.
Ah, yes. For those of you who might know H.P. Lovecraft, the absolute titan of cosmic horror, Lovecraft later called this one of the greatest horror stories in the English language.
And it really remains a masterpiece because it introduced an entirely new mechanism for fear. The plot is driven by a character named Dr. Raymond.
He's a surgeon, right?
Right, a surgeon who performs an experimental brain surgery on a young woman named Mary.
And he isn't trying to cure a tumor or fix an injury or anything normal?
No, definitely not. He performs this highly invasive surgery specifically to alter her brain structure so she can physically see the God Pan directly.
My read on this is that it's essentially a dark biological hack.
A biological hack, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It sounds like he's treating the human brain like an old radio receiver. He's taking a scalpel, soldering a new wire into the brain to pick up a frequency that human beings were biologically designed to ignore.
Right.
And when he turns the dial, the signal just absolutely blows out the speakers.
That analogy captures the brutal physical reality of the story perfectly. He is forcing a biological opening to a spiritual realm.
But when Mary wakes up and sees Pan, what actually happens? Because most Victorian horror is about ghosts or vampires.
Yeah, what follows isn't a traditional monster story at all. We don't get, like, a goat man chasing people through the woods.
Right, no clunky monster suits.
Exactly. What follows is an incredibly tense, slow-burn horror of corrupted nature, sudden suicides among London's elite, and what can really only be described as a profound cosmic violation.
Let's dig into that idea of a cosmic violation. Because if you read most Victorian horror from that era, the mechanics of fear are usually about moral evil.
Right, Dracula or something similar.
Exactly, a vampire trying to drink your blood, or a ghost seeking revenge for a murder. The great god Pan sounds like it's operating on a completely different frequency. What exactly is this Pan if it isn't a traditional villain?
That distinction is the very core of Machen's philosophy, and it's really how he redefined the genre. For Machen, true horror isn't about a villain wanting to do malicious things to you.
This is not personal.
Not at all. True horror is pure, immanent reality breaking through our fragile human categories. Pan represents the unfiltered, raw reality of the universe.
Wow.
It's ecstatic, it's ancient, it is teeming with life, and most importantly, it is utterly indifferent to human existence.
So it's not that the universe is actively out to get you, it's that the universe simply doesn't care about you at all.
Yes, exactly.
And its raw state is so intense that merely looking at it will literally destroy your mind. Like if you're walking your dog in the park, you see a nice lawn and some oak trees.
A very curated version of nature.
Right. And Machen is suggesting that if you actually saw the churning, relentless, biological life force of that park without your human filter, your brain would shatter.
Precisely. The terror aligns with mystical dread rather than moral evil. It's the realization that human beings are fundamentally biologically unequipped to witness the true nature of existence.
That is terrifying.
It is. When Dr. Raymond's scalpel cuts open that paper-thin veil we talked about earlier, the tragedy isn't that Mary sees a demon.
The tragedy is that she sees the truth.
Yes, she sees the truth, and the human container just cannot hold it.
That shifts the entire landscape of horror. You go from fighting a bad guy to merely trying to survive the nature of reality itself.
Exactly. It's a huge shift in the genre.
Now, the great god Pan focused heavily on a physical, surgical tearing of the veil. But as Machen's biography progresses, and he endures more personal hardship and isolation in London, his writing shifts, right?
Yeah, it starts to shift deeply inward.
Yeah.
He moved away from the scalpel, from forced physical openings.
And started exploring what happens when the human mind willingly decides to step into that ancient world on its own.
Right. The focus moves from a biological breach to a desperate psychological descent. A perfect example of this shift is his 1907 novel, The Hill of Dreams.
Our sources say this is a crucial text for understanding him, mostly because it's heavily semi-autobiographical.
Very much so. It follows a young protagonist named Lucian Taylor. And like Machen, Lucian is a struggling writer from Wales who moves to London, lives in squalor, and faces just constant rejection.
But instead of fighting back against the harsh realities of the city, Lucian just entirely checks out, doesn't he?
Yeah, he completely withdraws. He becomes obsessed with a Roman hill fort near his childhood home. And he begins to hallucinate this elaborate ancient Roman city, retreating further and further into his own mind. The sources actually describe the book not really as a traditional narrative, but as a literary fever dream.
And we really have to examine how Machen writes this descent. It's not portrayed as some whimsical fantasy getaway.
No, the psychological mechanics of Lucian's retreat are deeply self-destructive.
Because as his inner vision of this glowing, eternal Roman city becomes more vivid and real to him, his physical body in London is literally starving to death in a dingy rented room.
Exactly. The prose itself becomes hypnotic, dense, and hallucinatory. It forces the reader to experience Lucian's detachment from reality right alongside him.
It's such an agonizing portrait of isolation. He is actively choosing the ancient world over the modern one, but the toll is his own life. The line between imagination and reality just completely dissolves.
It does.
And that internal retreat is dangerous enough on its own. But what happens when that psychological descent actually manages to connect with something genuinely horrific on the outside?
Ah, right. That question leads us straight to his 1904 story, The White People.
Right. Which many critics and literary historians consider to be among the finest pieces of weird fiction ever written.
It really is. It perfects the themes he was grappling with in The Hill of Dreams, but structures them in a way that actively manipulates the reader's psychology.
The structure is incredibly clever. It's a nested narrative, right?
Yes, it opens with a prologue where two men are having an intense philosophical debate about the true nature of sin.
Okay, and then?
Then, to prove his point, one of the men produces a journal. And the core of the story is the text of this journal, which is presented as the diary of a young girl.
And this diary is essentially a meticulous, innocent-sounding record of her gradual initiation into genuine, ancient witchcraft.
The diary format is a brilliant framing device. Because you are reading the stream of consciousness thoughts of a child, the language is entirely devoid of typical horror tropes.
Oh, interesting. So she's not, like, trembling in fear.
Exactly.
Mhm.
She isn't describing dark rituals with terror. She's describing them like a child explaining a new game she learned in the woods.
Wow. So you, as the reader, are forced into an almost voyeuristic position.
Right. You're watching this young mind systematically detach from human reality and align itself with the hidden world we've been discussing, all while she remains completely unaware of the danger.
Okay, I want to circle back to that prologue, though, because it sets up a concept that I really want to wrestle with, since our sources place a massive emphasis on it.
The discussion about sin.
Yes. The men in the prologue explicitly state that true sin is, quote, aesthetic and metaphysical, not moral.
Right.
Now, if you're listening to this, maybe on your commute, you probably think of sin as a moral failing,
Sure, like cutting someone off in traffic, lying, stealing.
breaking the social contract. But an aesthetic and metaphysical sin sounds like something entirely different. Like, how does an aesthetic sin actually work? Is it just having terrible taste in the occult?
Well, no, not quite. It goes back to Machen's worldview. For him, moral sins are simply human rules designed for human interactions.
They just keep society functioning smoothly.
Exactly. But metaphysical sin has absolutely nothing to do with human laws. Metaphysical sin is the act of a human being reaching out and deliberately trying to touch that indifferent alien world.
A world that was never meant for human minds to engage with in the first place.
Right, it's a category error.
Like a human trying to breathe underwater and blaming the ocean for drowning them.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, a dog trying to do calculus. It's violating the boundaries of your own nature.
That is spot on. You're hitting on the exact mechanism of his philosophy. So the young girl in the diary isn't doing anything we'd consider evil in a courtroom.
She's not hurting anyone.
No. But by participating in these ancient rituals, she's engaging in behaviors that literally pull her out of the human metaphysical category. She's tearing the fabric of existence.
So it's an aesthetic sin because it's a violation of the natural order and harmony of our reality.
Yes. Think of it like a two-dimensional drawing trying to pull itself off the paper and become three-dimensional. The act itself is an abomination against the rules of the medium.
Oh man, that gives me chills. The true horror of the white people isn't a monster jumping out of the shadows.
No, it's the quiet, tragic realization that this innocent girl has successfully stepped off the paper and there is absolutely no way for her to return.
The sheer indifference of it all.
It's devastating.
So throughout his biography, we see this recurring literary theme. The ancient world bleeding into our reality, tearing the veil. Whether forced by a surgeon's scalpel, hallucinated in a starving writer's mind, or discovered in the woods by a child.
And this concept was so potent that eventually it didn't just stay confined to his fiction.
Right. A decade later, the entire British public experienced a tear in their own reality, and they actually used Macon's fiction to explain it.
This is undoubtedly one of the most fascinating intersections of literature and historical mass hysteria you will ever encounter. It really shows how deeply Macon's aesthetic had tapped into the collective subconscious.
So, let's set the stage for you guys. It's 1914, World War I is underway, the Battle of Mons has just occurred, and the British Expeditionary Force has suffered massive, unprecedented casualties.
It's a time of unimaginable trauma, grief, and anxiety for the British public back home.
And Arthur Machen is working as a journalist for the Evening News in London.
Right, trying to pay the bills.
So he writes a short piece of fiction called The Bowmen. It's a story entirely out of his own imagination about ghostly English archers from the medieval Battle of Agincourt.
And they suddenly appear in the sky to shoot down German soldiers and protect the retreating British troops.
He wrote it just as a comforting, patriotic piece of supernatural fiction, didn't he?
Yes, and he used a pseudo-journalistic style, writing it in a very matter-of-fact tone, which was pretty typical for his newspaper pieces at the time.
But the public read it, And they didn't see a short story. They took it as absolute fact.
Spread like wildfire.
Soldiers returning from the front started claiming they had actually seen these spectral figures. Nurses reported hearing stories from wounded men about angelic beings in the sky.
It's incredible. This single piece of fiction accidentally spawned a massive real-world legend that became globally known as the Angels of Mons.
It's as if Machen wrote a psychological software patch for a traumatized society, and they just downloaded it collectively without realizing it was fiction.
The psychology behind the mass hysteria is really the key here. The British public was facing industrial slaughter on a scale that had never been seen in human history.
The sheer brutality of machine guns and artillery just shattered their everyday understanding of the world.
Right, their reality had cracked. They desperately needed a larger, mythic narrative to make sense of the trauma, to feel that the universe wasn't just meaningless violence.
They needed to believe that the ancient world was stepping in to help them. But what's wild to me is that Machen spent months trying to convince people he made it up.
He really did. He published articles saying, no, I invented this story. It's not real.
And the public essentially told him he was wrong. They told the author he had just tapped into a truth he didn't understand.
Which is incredibly ironic, because the public's reaction perfectly validated Machen's own deeply held philosophy, something he called the Great Return.
The Great Return.
Yeah. Machen fundamentally believed that the old gods, the fairy world, and the buried mythic substrate of Britain never actually died out when cities were built.
He believed the landscape itself was deeply haunted.
Yes, and these ancient forces were just dormant, waiting beneath the surface.
Waiting just beneath that paper-thin veil.
Exactly. And when the Bowman was published, it resonated powerfully because he had given the public a vocabulary for a feeling they already harbored in their subconscious.
The trauma of the war thinned the veil.
It did. And the public's collective mind reached back into the ancient history of their landscape for protection. He brought the mythic substrate of Britain to the surface when they needed it most.
So the mechanism of the hysteria proved his literary thesis. When modern reality breaks down, the ancient world floods in.
That's exactly it.
So as we look at the entire scope of his biography, what does Arthur Machen's legacy mean for the genre, and for us as readers over a century later?
Well, before Machen, horror was largely confined to specific locations. It was localized.
Right, you had the haunted Gothic castle, the cursed amulet, the specific graveyard.
It was an aberration in an otherwise normal world. You could simply walk away from the haunted house and be safe.
But Machen took horror out of the haunted house and wove it into the very fabric of existence.
He did. He turned the ordinary, grimy streets of London and the idyllic rolling hills of Wales into active conduits for transcendent destructive experiences.
He made the entire world the haunted house.
He proposed the deeply unsettling idea that the true source of dread isn't a monster invading our world. It is the world itself, functioning exactly as it always has, just outside the narrow bandwidth of our human perception.
It completely changes how you engage with scary stories. Every single time you read a modern piece of weird fiction, or watch a movie about cosmic dread, or consume a story about indifferent forces lurking just beneath the surface of modern life, you are walking directly in Arthur Machen's footsteps.
Absolutely. He built the foundational road that modern horror still travels on today.
And to think he lived in poverty, cataloging books in London while carrying the immense, terrifying old gods of Wales in his head. And he still managed to alter the landscape of literature forever.
It is a profound testament to the power of human imagination.
Mm.
He used his art to systematically pierce the veil of the mundane, warning us that while the other side is magnificent, it is also utterly lethal to the human mind.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to ponder as you go about your day. Arthur Machen believed that the veil between our everyday, mundane world and that ancient alien reality was terrifyingly thin, even in the gaslit, hyper-industrialized streets of Victorian London.
That's something to think about.
So take a look around you today. In our hyper-connected, relentlessly rational modern world surrounded by screens and concrete, where do you think those thin spots in reality exist right now? Until next time, keep your eyes open.